Lots of people who have joined us. Welcome to this week's Textile Talks. I am Leslie Levy. I am the Executive Director of the International Quilt Museum here in Lincoln, Nebraska at the University of Nebraska. We proudly steward the world's largest collection of publicly held quilts. As many of you know, our collection spans 5 centuries and over 50 countries. So it is a delight and an honor to be the director of the Quilt Museum and to be joining you on Textile Talks this week. Before we begin, I would like to recognize the organizations that partner with us to provide the Textile Talks to you each week. I give and extend our gratitude to the Modern Quilt Guild, the Quilt Alliance, the San Jose Museum of Quilts and Textiles, SACWA, and of course, Surface Design Association. We're honored to bring you these free and inspiring programs each week with the help of our sponsors. Our platinum sponsors are Moda and Quilting Daily. Our silver sponsors are equilter.com and Aurifil. Our bronze sponsors are Artistic Artifacts, Clover, Empty Spools Seminars, Misty Fuse, 9 Patch Fabrics, Quilt Mania, Schiffer Publishing, Exotic Silks and Tie Silks, and the Quilt Show. So thank you to all of those who help sponsor us and bring these to you. Just a couple housekeeping reminders before I introduce our program. As Lucy put the notice up before we began, we respectfully ask that you be courteous as you engage with speakers and moderators and the other participants today. Please use the Q&A function for any questions that you might have. I will monitor that for our speakers today. You can also use the survey function for any commentaries or ways in which we can improve this process. If you prefer not to see notifications, please feel free to click on the chat button to toggle those on or off. We love the live caption function that we provide. It makes Textile Talks accessible to a wider audience. If that is something you prefer not to see or view, you can turn those off as well. We have kind of a fun, different program for you today. So it's my honor to introduce to you two of the wonderful experts from the International Quilt Museum's team. Camilo Sanchez has a degree in industrial design from the Pontifical Xaverian University in Bogota, Colombia. He also has a Master's of Arts in Museology from the University of East Anglia in Norwich, UK. Since 1999, Camilo has worked in museums and cultural centers as an exhibition designer and a museology consultant, developing many projects in several museums around Colombia and abroad. He's also lectured on exhibition design at several Colombian universities. Until 2020, he was the manager of the complete renovation of the National Museum of Colombia and the Colombian correspondent for the Federation of International Human Rights Museums in Latin America. He was also the deputy chair for the International Council of Museums representing Colombia. We lovingly and are so happy that Camilo joined us in 2020, or 2021 February, as the head of our exhibitions department. So we're very excited to have Camilo with us. And joining him today is Marin Hanson. Marin is the International Quilt Museum's curator of international collections. She is responsible for building and interpreting the museum's non-Western collection. She has been a curator at the International Quilt Museum since 2001. She earned her master's degree in museum studies and textile history from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and her PhD in museum studies from the University of Leicester in the United Kingdom. Marin has created and curated a wide range of exhibitions for the museum, and she has also edited or co-edited several of our fabulous publications. She is also the main project curator for World Quilts, which you can find on the museum's website. It is our online home for in-depth information on a fascinating variety of global and quilt related topics. So Marin and Camilo, they have an amazing kind of fun, different program for you today. And so without further ado, the International Quilt Museum presents Modern Meets Modern.
Well, thank you so much, Leslie. That was a fabulous introduction. And I am honored to be here with my colleague, Camilo Sanchez. As Leslie said, we kind of wanted to take a different approach to our topic today. The topic is a current exhibition at our museum, Modern Meets Modern. It is on view until March 19th of next year. So you've got plenty of time to come to Lincoln and see it in person. But what we wanted to do today was introduce the exhibition to you via the topic of exhibition planning and production. So we wanted to sort of pull back the curtain and talk to you a bit about all the stages and steps we went through in order to produce this exhibition. We are always working several years out, 3 to 5 years out usually, although I will admit that sometimes we do come down to the wire on some portions of the exhibitions, but obviously we have to be planning well in advance. And so I thought that Camilo and I could just share a little bit of that background information with you as we talk about the exhibition Modern Meets Modern. Just in case you don't know who we are the International Quilt Museum at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln. Leslie already indicated to you the fact that we have the world's largest publicly held collection. We have over 6,000 objects and from over 50 different countries. We collect globally and from all eras, and we want to represent the world of quilts. So that includes objects that have patchwork in them, applique, and quilting. And our mission then is to build a global collection and audience that celebrate the cultural and artistic significance of quilts. So that includes collecting, it includes storage and preservation, taking care of the quilts on a day-to-day basis. It includes exhibiting them, which is a part of our interpretation mission. And exhibitions really are the sort of the core of what we do in terms of interpreting, but we also produce catalogs and websites and online media, social media. So we are always looking for new ways to share our collection with the world. And so that gives you just a very, very brief overview of who we are as an organization. Now, to start talking about the exhibition Modern Meets Modern and sort of what the spark or the kernel was for that exhibition, I included 2 images here. On the left is a book we published just about a little over a decade now, titled American Quilts in the Modern Age, 1870 to 1940. I co-edited that with Patricia Cruz. And the topic of that book really was looking at quilts that were made during what sometimes is called the modern age, post-Civil War, when America was going through all of these major transformations and social upheaval in some cases. New technologies were advancing, industrialization had really notched up to a new level. So we were in sort of the second phase of the Industrial Revolution. Immigration was on the rise, so new people were becoming Americans. There was also migration within the United States. So there was just a lot going on, and the idea of modernity became a more solid concept. The idea that we were becoming a modern nation and we were modernizing as a culture and society. So that's what we looked at in that book. We included over 600 quilts from our collection that illustrated different aspects of what it meant to be sort of a modern quilt from the late 19th or early 20th century. So that was like sort of one poll, if there were 2 polls that inspired this exhibition. The other was the fact that in the last 5 to 10 years, we have been building a modern quilt collection, and by that I'm referring to the modern quilt movement, which is a couple of decades, well, 2 decades plus old now. And these are all quilts, largely early 21st century quilts that have often have a new way of approaching quilt making, or a new way of a new take on the aesthetics of what a quilt could look like. And so I have an example here of a Victoria Finley Wolf double wedding ring quilt. You can see that she's riffing off of the traditional double wedding ring pattern, but really turning it into something completely new, removing portions of it, adding in solid fabrics, intensively quilting it. So those were the two, as I said, sparks for an exhibition we ended up calling Modern Meets Modern. And the question we really wanted to ask was, what happens when yesterday's modern meets today's modern? And of course, you can look at a definition, of a dictionary definition of modern, and I usually jump down to number 3 there, which says denoting a current or recent style or trend in art, architecture, or other cultural activity, marked by a significant departure from traditional styles and values. So the idea of modern is constantly changing. It's a relative term. So anything that was thought of as modern 100 years ago might not seem that way now. It's constantly evolving. And some of the areas that we can compare in terms of what changed between those two eras. These are things that I was thinking about. You'll see up there, I wrote panel number 3 and draft. I wanted to share with you how I was sort of developing some of the concepts that ended up being included in the exhibition. So comparing fabrics from the late 19th or early 20th century with present day 21st century fabrics. You know, in the 19th century, fabric was becoming more affordable. And today, new ways of producing fabric are available, like digital printing. In terms of quilt styles, you know, there was just a huge range of quilt styles that Americans sort of shifted through quite rapidly in the late 19th, early 20th centuries. And today, a lot of people want to move away from what are thought of as mainstream or traditional styles, or embrace them in new ways. Technology was changing in both eras. The sewing machine became more widely available after the Civil War, which meant that more quilts ended up being made. Today, things like the long arm quilting machine has massively changed the way quilts are created. Communication is huge. Advertising and mail order became much more sophisticated in the late 19th century. And then today, of course, the internet has absolutely changed everything in terms of quilt makers being able to find like-minded people who are, and to share their work. And then just in terms of who makers are, quilt making became much more democratized in the late 19th, early 20th century. And then today we've just got this whole sort of DIY spirit of people thinking, well, I can do this. This is something I can make at home. And then they can, communicate with others online to find out how to do that. So those are just some concepts that helped shape the overall story of Modern Meets Modern. Then the next step for me as the curator was to start finding some quilts. I needed to get some inspiration by looking at actual objects from our collection. So again, you see up there, I have draft, and here was the first attempt at finding a grouping. And as you look at these, you probably notice, well, there's a lot of triangles going on there. And of course, the triangle is such a basic building block in quilt making, in patchwork and piecing. I know when I first learned how to make quilts, the half square triangle was that was the first thing I did, essentially. I mean, maybe that's the next step beyond a 9-patch, but it's very early on. So I went through our collection and that's a really great way to get started on curating an exhibition, is to just dive into the collection and start sifting through and finding similarities, visual similarities in this case, for the most part. And then you start to refine those ideas. And one of the concepts, or one of the ideas that came out early on, is that we wanted to feature the modern quilt movement, or 21st century modern quilt, as sort of the anchor in each of these groupings. And so in this case, it was Paula Lieber's fractured triangles. We thought, okay, that's that's the anchor. How do we then develop around that core? And so I narrowed it down. Originally, you saw I had 7 quilts. I kind of narrowed it down to 5. And I thought, well, that seems like a good little galaxy of quilts there. Another step, or the next step, might be, or at least it was in my case, to come up with a name for that grouping. And we called it triangulations. And then just to sort of start to bring together and summarize the idea of that group, I drafted a little, almost a sort of a, just a one sentence description for that grouping. So it says equilateral, isosceles, acute, oblique, right, or half square in quilt making lingo. Triangles of all forms appear in quilts, old and new. Now, I'm going to break the narrative here just for a quick second and talk to you about what we call object review. This is a critical stage when we're developing an exhibition. It's fine and dandy for a curator like myself to just dive into the collection, our database, and find all sorts of quilts that I just love and think are the best, and they work together great. But until we go through the object review, which is a very careful consideration and examination of all of the potential objects for an exhibition, until we go through that and we take down detailed notes and look at condition, then we can't finalize the list. So until we've gone through that, then it's all sort of tentative still. So here you can see Jamie Swartz and Sarah Walcott, our collections assistant and collections manager, respectively, examining a quilt and getting it ready to see if it will work in an exhibition, if the size is correctly noted, if it has a hanging sleeve or not. And I think that's what they're doing there. They're measuring the back side to identify how long a hanging sleeve needs to be. So I just wanted to make that note that, you know, as wild and extravagant a curator might want an exhibition to be, we have to get down to brass tacks and face reality by doing a very thorough object review of all the pieces. With that said, in this grouping, I ended up having to replace a piece because in the object review, we noticed that there were some condition issues on the quilt I had originally identified, and this quilt ended up being a better option, a safer option for the object itself. And then just to show you, I won't share these labels with you for all of the groupings, but the next step that I would have taken, or that I did take, is to start drafting up some labels then. And in this case, we really wanted to focus on sort of design elements that the quilts might have in common. Now, you know, Paula Lieber's quilt has a very distinct look to it, that sort of facet or topographical map look, as I like to call it, which is quite different from the more regular triangle shapes in the antique quilts. But still, the fact that, for instance, in the bottom left 1,000 Triangles quilt, and I'm just realizing I have a 1,000 Triangles quilt behind me as well, it allowed us to talk about the concept of tessellation and repeating geometric shapes in a way where they fit together very neatly like a puzzle. So we could bring up design concepts like this and talk about how quilt makers have always sort of had to think differently, or they were drawn to certain approaches, certain design elements. It just allowed us to, kind of open up that view into how a quilt maker thinks about quilts and how they, what they're attracted to, what they are, what they're drawn to. And so moving on, I'm going to quickly show you all of the other groupings, because I want to, I don't want to take up too much time here, because Camilo then is going to take us to the next stage, which is to show how we actually then start to think about putting these objects into the three-dimensional space of our gallery. The next grouping dealt with squares. So again, just looking at quilts, bringing them together based on geometric shapes. The quilt that anchored it was this very early modern quilt movement quilt by Weeks Ringel and Bill Kerr, Outside the Box, from 2004. We found some fabulous pieces to go with it that demonstrated different ways of forming square shapes, not just plunking down a whole bunch of squares, but for instance, in the upper left, finding a log cabin that creates sort of dimensionality and yeah, almost a 3D effect that creates squares through its light and dark placement. And we called the group Squared Off. But again, I ended up having to make a replacement after object review. But this was a fortuitous one. And I loved the fact that it is a log cabin quilt that creates the sort of almost a transparency effect, a shadow effect, which also is a great design element that quilt makers have often utilized in their quilts. Our next grouping was looking at circular shapes. The anchor was and is Victoria Finley Wolf's Double-Edged Love from 2013. We wanted definitely to include a traditional double wedding ring quilt with her quilt, since they're so closely related. So in the very topmost quilt there, you see a double wedding ring going in circles. And we just talked about how circular shapes can be created in different ways, whether it's directly or indirectly, because the indirect circles I saw in the kaleidoscope quilt in that upper right, although it too ended up getting replaced. So we used a log cabin pineapple to demonstrate or show that sort of the radial nature of the log cabin pineapple, the sort of radiating fan blade effect that you often get with that pattern. Our fifth group was looking at the concept of sort of a center medallion or central focus. And we loved this Katie Pedersen quilt, Psychedelic Baby from 2011 for that concept. We call it centrality. And we just wanted to talk about the fact that today people make quilts with a central focus, but that's also frequently, it was a style or a format used in the late 19th and early 20th century as well. And in this one grouping, we featured Thomas Nauer's Smart is Beautiful #2 as sort of the anchor quilt. It's from 2015, and he uses ASCII binary code in it to create symbolize letters, and that spell out SMARTISBEAUTIFUL. So smart is beautiful is what each of those blocks going across and down spells out. And so dots and dashes was a great concept to include antique quilts as well. And I love the piece on the top right is a Burgoyne surrounded quilt from circa 1920, 1930. And I love that it imitates a woven coverlet, an antique American woven coverlet, especially because binary, as you probably know, is the sort of the basis of computer coding. And weaving, and specifically the jacquard loom, was also sort of a proto computer coding device. So it was an inspiration for some of the earliest computer coding. I like that those two get to be together side by side in the gallery. And our final group, it looks a little bit like a mixed bag, but the concept really was driven by this quilt, Kathy York's Hidden Messages from 2019. And I love that idea that quilts can have hidden messages in many, many different ways. Now hers is a very literal hidden message. You can only see the message when a light is shining through it from behind, and it ends up being a Ralph Waldo Emerson quotation, but you can only, it's hidden all the time unless you have, bright light shining from behind. Now, some of the antique quilts have hidden messages in very different ways. For instance, on the bottom right, that very odd, very modern, again, almost Art Deco looking quilt. Its message, you can't really see it in the fabric right now. You would have to zoom in, but on that purple fabric, you can see just a small little dimple or dot. It looks like a darker area, and it actually is the logo. It's a sunflower, which was the logo for the Republicans, Alfred Landon and Frank Knox, in the 1936 US presidential election. They ran against Franklin Delano Roosevelt and John Nance Garner and lost fabulously. But so the logo is of their political campaign, and it's also included in very, very almost like a shadow effect on some of those other fabrics as well. So there's a hidden political message in that quilt. So those were the ways that we started to group the quilts together and find ways to talk about them in a meaningful way. Now, the other thing, the last slide I'm going to show you is this one, because we also knew that walking into the gallery, we had to have just two stunning, sort of hit you over the head quilts that represented those two eras of modern, late 19th century modern and early 21st century modern. And just serendipitously, we were able to pair these two together. They are just so fantastic. This Ocean Waves variation on the left has the same sort of X-shaped symbols popping out that are similar to Maritza Soto's work in Go North. And so in a minute, Camilo will show us what that actually looks like in the gallery, but they are pretty much knock your socks off quilts. So that is just a brief presentation on how we undertook that first stage of identifying the quilts, making sure that they were safe for exhibition by doing an object review, grouping them, starting to develop some ideas about them, and maybe even drafting up some labels. But even if you've discovered that the quilts are able to be shown, you have to then make sure that they're actually going to fit in your space. So I'm going to stop sharing now and let Camilo take over on talking about how we use CAD programs to three-dimensionally represent our exhibitions and to design them. Camilo,
great.
handing it
Thank
over.
you, Marin. Yeah, so I'm gonna talk about the
There you go.
right there, about the design process, which tends to be, like you mentioned, that we try to plan years in advance, but always exhibition design is the funnel, and all the problems come together at the same time, closer to the opening.
That's right. There's always
than,
something you have to deal with.
years. So 6 months ago, we started to seriously discuss the exhibition design of this particular exhibition. And whenever people ask you, what do you do for a living? And you say, I work in a museum, what they think is this immediately. And that kind of museum, encyclopedic museum, huge museum, which is like the reference for most people what museums are like, tend to be like this. And you will see that the exhibition designer is really low in the chain of command. Big museums and very personal museums tend to be very vertical. So the exhibition design process, it's not very organic. Or now big museums, they just hire an external company to do it, which is very strange. Because
problematic.
yeah, and way more expensive. So we are lucky that our museum, it's a human scale museum. And we are kind of a more a republic rather than an empire. And we're only 15 people doing everything. So we get to do this, which is the ideal for from my point of view of any contemporary museum, which is a museology of dialogue, where you can have discussions about everything with anybody in the team, and everybody will participate and is not afraid of sharing their views or their opinions. And of course, we have Chewbacca's that nobody understands what they're saying, or we have R2D2s that know everything. But at the end of the day, is a more organic process that allows you to make better decisions and come up with, from my point of view, again, more compelling exhibitions for the visitors. So that said, the exhibition design process is actually more like this, because once Marin is finished with well, I have to say that the scripts are finished on the opening day, because they're always working documents, and that dialogue means that you have to have lots of conversations about the script, the focus of the exhibition, the big idea of the exhibition, because those discussions are the ones that shape the design. However, exhibition designers, we have a natural enemy or predator, which is conservators, because exhibition design practice goes against conservation. Anything you exhibit, you're damaging it. And so it's natural that when the very creative exhibition designer starts working and it's all happy, you have people that are scared behind him, looking at what he does, and you have naturally conservators, and then whoever is in charge of getting the money to pay for that. Because even if you do an exhibition with your house printer, that's gonna cost you money. Even if it's super cheap, any exhibition is gonna cost you. So we started working with Marin and the whole team on this exhibition, and I'll share with you. This is the software that we use, which is available for free. It's from Google. I don't know, Google sell it or something to another company, but it's called Sketchup, and it's pretty intuitive to use and it's easy to use. So we have a model of all of our galleries, and we start obviously with the empty gallery, and then we put the quilts not in the space yet, but we have to scale them because the first thing you have to realize is if they fit in the space,
Right.
and sometimes they don't. So you have to take critical decisions about how are we going to fit this in the first place. If we use a traditional kind of wall exhibition, or do we need extra walls? And I think the first idea for this exhibition was to have this super contemporary quilt accompanied by 6
Yeah, I think there were
quilts rather than
more.
5.
Four.
Yeah. So we started to put them in the space and started working with that. And then you start thinking about like triangles. So you try to catch the big idea of the exhibition and try to translate it into the space. So I was like thinking about a triangle space, and then for circles, it was kind of a circular space, and for squares was a more square space. And that was like the first idea, super quick. Uh, but that first idea, you you always know that you're not gonna end up with that, but there are little things that come out of that. For example, in the dots and dashes, we wanted the most modern piece to be off the wall. So it was highlighted from the rest. And that's something that we kept in the rest of the attempts we did for the design. So the next step is, all right, so we move triangles to this side, squares to this side. We kind of organize every chapter of the script. And then we thought about, well, why don't we assign, because you're working with shapes, so let's assign a shape to every space. And then we started thinking, oh, that looks great. We can use colors from each of the most modern quilts for each of the shapes that we were going to use. And then we said, oh, that's great. It looks like a swatch watch.
Yeah, I think Camilo and I were both channeling our 80s childhood.
Yeah. We're really from the 80s, so we were having a very good time designing this exhibition. And but then you have to face reality. And reality is, even though if you would love to have huge shapes, then this is the size of a plywood sheet. And you have to try to accommodate your ideas into a budget and a production process that is not going to be over budget or super difficult to produce, and it's going to take longer to produce. And then something that we are very good at forgetting when we design exhibition is, what are you going to do with that stuff later when you take down the exhibition? So that's a big issue. So we have to go from huge shapes to smaller shapes that could fit into one sheet of plywood. So that'll be easier for the contractors to make. And then we were thinking about adding some, like the text that Marin shared with you for all the individual quilts. We were thinking about having it around the quilts, but then also budget was a big issue for that, so we decided to do smaller labels. And then we started to play with the oh, this guy is huge. Oh, he's standing
in the air.
Yeah, he's standing somewhere that there. So we wanted to confront these two quilts, and that was like the first idea that we had. But then we thought that we needed to use the bridge, which connects the older galleries with the newer gallery that we have in the museum. And you have to be very aware that you have to have something striking in that wall.
It's a very dramatic long view that we have there. So you want something that's really going to draw people down the way, down the bridge.
And for the bridge, we discussed, why don't we include like new pieces from the collection that show that the museum, like, this is a never-ending job. Like, we collect and collect new quilts. Oh, she's flying too. I'm sorry for that. And then you start taking quilts in, out of the space. And if you look at this wall, for example, this quilt is huge. So, like I told Marin, we have to get rid of one, but then we said, all right, we can work around it and fold it. This is not folded in this version yet, but I'll show you that it got folded, so we have more space for the other quilt. So finally, we decide to place the two introduction quilts next to each other and have a huge wall with that question that Mari shared with us.
We wanted to make sure that the question was in, there was no doubt about what we were going to pursue in this exhibition. Hey, Camilo, we might be running a little short on time, so
yeah, I'll be done in a second. So this is the final version of the exhibition. This is what you can see, and yeah, so we have a contest, and
yeah, I was going to say we should show that wall real quick because I want to be able to promote the Modern Meets Modern Challenge very quickly before we go into looking at the 3D tour that Camilo created. This is the space that we have reserved in the gallery for our Modern Meets Modern Challenge. Go to our homepage. You can click on our banner. There's a banner, a rotating banner. One of them goes straight to the Modern Meets Modern Challenge. It is a challenge to create a quilt that responds to one of the antique quilts in the Modern Meets Modern exhibition. And I see that one of our judges, David Owen Hastings, has just put the link into the chat for us. Thank you very much, David. So David is one of the jurors, Sarah Bond and Weeks Ringgold. So we have a fantastic jury panel. The deadline is January 1st at noon Central Time. So if you want to make your own 16-inch by 16-inch response to one of the Modern Meets Modern quilts, head over to our website and take a look at the rules. So yeah, Camilo was able to sort of hold a whole space for that component of the exhibition. They will go on view, we're hoping by mid-February.
Yep.
For the last portion of the exhibition.
Yep. And at the same time, we had to develop the look of the exhibition, the poster of the exhibition, and all the graphic identity. So we have several proposals for the image of the exhibition, and I'm gonna go very fast with this so I can show you the 3D gallery. So we ended up with this one. So you see, like, this is at least a week. Each of these drafts is a week of work.
Yeah.
We got to the final one.
Yep. And we have a team, an exhibition team that everyone reviews it. Everyone gives their opinion. Like you said, it's very much a dialogue.
Yeah.
So yeah, the one on the bottom is where we ended up.
Yeah. And then the pandemic was terrible because not just because of the pandemic, but for museums, it was a very difficult time. We didn't have visitors. Many museums had real trouble, like opening up after, strange to say, after the pandemic. We're still in the pandemic and it's getting worse. But something we did is we bought, I don't know if you can see it here. It's a camera, it's called a Matterport camera that captures the space and makes a 3D model. So this is the Matterport website, and we got the camera, we got the subscription to it, and here you take the camera, you take an iPad, and then you can start going through the space, and you go with the camera and you take a picture every 6 feet, and that captures the whole space, and it allows you to include, for example, wait, I'll put this here. If you want to edit it, then you can do, you can include text, whatever you want, or because something that way, I don't want to change this. For example, here, like there are texts that you could read easily with the camera because it gives you like really high quality. But like labels are very hard to read. So what you do is you insert a tag with that information. And it's a great technology. You can keep track of all the views that you get. And it allows you to do fun stuff. Like, for example, this is the gallery, and you can do something that real visitors can do, and is you can go behind this quilt and look at the back. Isn't that cool? So that's the final part of the exhibition process. We take pictures, we do the 3D gallery, and yeah, that's it.
Yeah, we hope.
Are we doing on time?
Yeah, and we do it on time and mostly within budget, correct?
Yeah, definitely.
Camilo, would you just take us quickly through the exhibition so that they
Sure.
can see all of it using the Matterport software?
Sure. I'll go back to the entrance.
And Lucy very kindly included the link in the chat, so you can go directly to that as well.
Yeah, so this is where we start. This is the bridge. And we go into the gallery. And like the camera is so good that it actually allows you to see little mistakes, like in the painting, if there's a mark on the floor or anything. So it's super good. And this is the space reserved for the Modern Meets Modern challenge. But as you can see, you can zoom in, and it's very nice technology. And then you can store all your exhibitions or all your spaces. And so I think it's been great for the museum. And then you can upload videos or links to videos. In this case, we selected videos made from students. And you can also, we had included videos from some of the artists, and you can see them too. So that's all stuff that you can add to your 3D model.
Yeah, and I would like to note that, yeah, what Camilo was just hovering over is for a handful of the modern quilt movement quilts, we do have videos of the artists themselves talking about the quilt. So yeah, make sure you check that out when you go to the virtual tour.
Yeah, you can see more stuff on the virtual tour than in the galleries.
That's right.
Uh,
Bonus content.
Yeah.
So I would offer up, we've had a question that asks if we have virtual tours. And so I just wanted to take a moment to say, anybody who can't make it to the museum can go to our website, which is internationalquiltmuseum.org, and you can click on our exhibitions tab, and that will take you to the current exhibitions that are up, as well as our past exhibitions. And when you click on those links, then you can take virtual tours of our exhibitions when you can't make it to see us in person.
Yep.
Yeah.
Marin, we
Yes.
have a question. Somebody would like to know on the Modern Meets Modern Challenge if we are looking for an image by the 1st of January, or are we looking for the completed item by January 1?
Right. It would be an image of the completed item by January 1st. And I know I saw in the chat that several people were a little disappointed about how soon that was. We did announce the challenge back in October. So unfortunately, you might not have seen it through our social media and through the social media of some of our sponsors, Curated Quilts, Moda Fabrics, etc. So hopefully we will be able to do another challenge like this that you could participate in if you didn't see the announcement back in October. We're very excited about this challenge. But yes, you would upload images of the completed quilt on January 1st.
All right. Well, we've answered most of the comments or questions in our chat function. Again, on our website, the virtual tours are free. So please don't feel like you have to pay extra or that that's a members only benefit. They are on our website for anyone to enjoy or to share. Also, I would remind people and our viewers that we do have a YouTube channel. So there are opportunities, again, not only to see the previously recorded Textile Talks, but to also see other videos or information on our exhibition process, our curation process, our collection process that are on, if you go to YouTube and type in International Quilt Museum, there's a library of videos available for you at that time. Any other comments or questions? Oh, let's see, we might have one more question. David Owen Hastings says that it looks like we might be exhibiting the top 10 quilts from our challenge, but he's wondering if there was a possibility that we might be showing more above the doorway based on Camilo's mock-up. So Camilo, do you want to answer that?
Good eye, David.
Yeah, we'll wait to see what we get, because we discussed it a lot. How many quilts? Will there be enough space? What do we want to show, like, with the results that we get from that challenge? So that's pending.
It's pending, right? We haven't done a challenge like this before, so we're really excited to see how many entrants we get. We already have a good dozen entries, more than a dozen entries. So I think, as Camilo said, we'll wait to see the quality and quantity that we get, and for sure the top 10 will be shown, but you never know. There just might be so many good ones that we end up wanting to make some more. Camilo can make some more space in that CAD for some extra quilts, perhaps.
Sure. It's so easy in the CAD. In reality,
yeah, the reality is always a little bit different, but yes.
So friends, we have a question. We were asked, how long from inspiration to exhibition?
Oh boy, that changes from exhibition to exhibition. Ideally, inspiration would be 3+ years out, 3 to 5 years out. As with any process, as Camilo said early on, the momentum starts building. So early on, let's say it's 3 years out and we have that inspiration moment or quilt or concept. It might be a few months before we really start kicking into high gear. And then by a year out, we really should be into development. And then when, as Camilo showed in his slides, at 6 months, we're really into high gear at that point. We are putting things into CAD. We have already done the object reviews. The curator has already sort of sketched out the concept and maybe has written most of the text. But design really then, so yeah, it's flexible, but let's say 3 years. What do you think, Camilo?
Yeah, definitely. And even the year before, you had to plan a budget for exhibitions. So even though if you don't know exactly how an exhibition is going to look, you have a nebulous thoughts about those upcoming exhibitions, and that's something we discuss regularly, because you have to have in mind that that's going to cost you money. And so yeah.
Right.
Marin, can you answer what resolution of photography we use to scan the quilts to put it in our SketchUp?
Camilo can probably answer that. It doesn't need to be super high resolution for the CAD.
You can take it from a Word document. The important thing is you have them either on JPEG or PNG. And PNG is better because you can, like, I'll
remove the background.
If you have objects that are not perfectly square, you can remove the background and make it invisible, so you have the real shape of the object. It's difficult to do three-dimensional objects perfectly, like a chair, but there are libraries for that. So with two-dimensional images, you can use any resolution. Before getting the Matterport, we used the videos that you can create in SketchUp. SketchUp
do
gives
like a
you,
fly through.
yeah, you can fly through the exhibition. It's not obviously the same, but you can, if you're gonna do that, then you have to have fairly good images for the objects you want to see. But 300 dpi is super.
Plenty.
So we just have a minute left, and one of the questions is, because we do take up to 3 years in deciding and planning what our exhibition schedule is. Of course, we got the question, what are we working on right now? So, Marin, I'm going to let you give just a brief, because we only have a minute.
Yeah, in 1 minute.
1 minute, what we're working on.
Right. Well, right now we are, of course, we are looking 3 to 5 years out, but simultaneously we are looking just 3 to 5 months out. And in the spring, we have an exhibition, a series of exhibitions called An Evolving Vision, the James Collection at 25. So that's what we're really, the short term, we're really focused on that right now. And it will be honoring and celebrating the artist's James Collection, which was it was the kernel that started us. It was the gift to the University of Nebraska that really allowed the International Quilt Museum to exist and thrive. So we will be celebrating that collection and the donors. And we hope everyone will keep an eye out for the exhibition, the online exhibition, the virtual exhibition, the catalog. There's a lot coming your way. And I'm sure there will be a textile talk about it.
Yeah. So again, I wanted to thank everyone for joining us. I wanted to thank the partner organizations that come together to put on the Textile Talks every week. Lucy has added in the chat function that next week is the San Jose Museum of Quilt and Textiles, and they're visiting with a few artists from Layered and Stitched. And also I wanted to once again give a shout out to our wonderful, amazing sponsors and their generosity. They enable us to do this every week. So thank you all for joining us. We appreciate it. If you have any comments or questions as a result of this, or you think of something later, please don't hesitate to reach out to us privately. You can get all of our contact information on the website, and we would always love to hear from you. So thank you all for joining us. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next week at Textile Talks.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.